I used to think that paranoia was something that happened to other people, not to women like me. If you met me before all this, you'd say I was normal, soft-spoken, kind, maybe too forgiving. A nurse who believed people were basically good and that family, no matter how messy, deserved patience. That version of me is gone now. My name is Ava, I'm 31 years old, and the person who destroyed my sense of safety was my own mother-in-law. It didn't happen all at once. Manipulation never does. It starts so small, so quietly, you don't even notice the ground shifting beneath your feet. At first, I liked Carol. She was polished, well-spoken, always wearing too much perfume, but in a trying to impress you kind of way. She smiled a lot, but none of it ever reached her eyes. The first time she met me, she said, "Oh, you're the nurse," smiling, but with a tone that felt like a test. She brought me a candle. I chose clean cotton scent. I thought it fit you. You seem like someone who likes things tidy. Tidy. Clean. Controlled. I should have paid attention to that. When Daniel and I got married, she insisted we move near her. "It's practical," she said. "I can help. I can be useful. You'll appreciate me being close." Daniel thought it was sweet. He said, "She's just trying to be involved. She's intense, yeah, but she loves me. That's all." I didn't want to be the wife who creates conflict, so I went along with it. We bought a small house 15 minutes from Carol's. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Or at least I thought it was. Because from day one, Carol behaved like the house belonged to her. She had a key, not for emergencies, but for access. She walked in whenever she wanted, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes when I came home from work. No knocking, no text, just the door opening and her voice calling out, "It's only me!" Only her, the woman who commented on everything. The way I folded towels, the spices I used, the way I arranged my cabinets. "You keep baking sheets here? Interesting. We never stored rice like that in our home." "Oh, you wear that to work?" Always small digs disguised as observations, always with that fake smile. But the worst wasn't what she said. It was what she somehow knew. It started subtly. Daniel and I had a quiet argument one night in our bedroom with the door closed. We weren't yelling, we were tired. I told him softly, "I feel like your mother is crossing boundaries. I need space, Daniel. I need privacy." The next day, Carol casually said, "Ava, darling, setting too many boundaries can be dangerous for a marriage." Word. 4. Word. My heart dropped. I asked Daniel if he told her. He swore he didn't. That was the first red flag. But more followed. Every time Daniel and I spoke in our bedroom, about her, about money, about needing distance, she brought up details she shouldn't know. "Oh, honey," she said once, her tone sharp beneath the sweetness. "I'm not trying to control your home. I know you think I am, but I'm only trying to help." Think she's controlling. That was exactly what I'd told Daniel the night before. It felt like being slowly suffocated, like someone else was living inside my walls, inside my conversations, inside my marriage. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was imagining patterns. Until the day she quoted me. Exactly. It was after a long shift. I walked into the kitchen and found her already there. She smiled at me, tight, rehearsed. "You look exhausted. Is it because no one respects your privacy at home?" The words hit me like a punch. No one respects your privacy. Exactly what I had whispered to Daniel 2 nights earlier. My throat closed. My hands trembled. "How do you know that?" I asked. She sipped her tea and said softly, "Oh, darling, a mother hears everything when she cares enough." And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't imagining anything. I was being watched, listened to, monitored, and I was going to prove it, even if it destroyed everything. I didn't sleep the night she repeated my private words back to me. Not a single minute. Daniel slept beside me, breathing softly, unaware that I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation we had ever had in this room. Every whisper, every argument, every vulnerable moment. All of it suddenly felt contaminated, like I had been emotionally naked in front of someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Around 3 a.m., I sat up in bed. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from certainty. There was something in our house, something listening, something recording, and I was going to find it. The next morning, Daniel noticed bags under my eyes. "You okay?" He asked. I didn't answer. I was already on my knees, checking under the bed frame, sliding my fingers along the wooden slats, feeling for wires or tape. Ava, what are you doing? I'm looking, I whispered. For what? For whatever your mother used to record us. He sighed loudly. The kind of sigh someone gives when they're tired of your feelings. Ava, we talked about this. You're stressed, you're overthinking, and my mom is weird, not criminal. I lifted my head slowly, meeting his eyes. She quoted me, Daniel. She quoted me exactly. And I didn't say those words to anyone except you. He moved his hand toward my shoulder. I flinched. He pulled back as if offended. Oh my God, Ava, seriously? You think my mother hid microphones in our house? Do you hear how insane you sound? Insane. There it was. A word that sticks to your ribs like poison. I felt my eyes burn, but I swallowed it down. Crying would only make me look weaker, more irrational. So instead, I stood up, dusted my hands, and said calmly, whether you believe me doesn't matter. I know what I heard, and I'm going to find out how she heard it. He shook his head and walked away. But I stayed exactly where I was, kneeling on the floor like someone praying because, in a way, I was. I was praying that I wasn't losing my mind. And deep inside, I already knew I wasn't. The following days became an investigation. I checked the smoke detectors. Nothing. I unscrewed the back of picture frames. Nothing. I opened vent grills, flashlight in hand. Dust, but nothing else. I even crawled behind the TV, pulling out cables, tracing each one like a detective. I knew what Daniel was thinking. I knew he thought I was spiraling. He stopped saying it out loud, but the look was always there in his eyes. She's losing it. But I wasn't. Because every time I began doubting myself, Carl would say something new, something she shouldn't know. One afternoon, I was on a phone with my sister, in the living room, not the bedroom, telling her, I'm tired of being the problem in this family. I'm tired of feeling like everything is my fault. I spoke softly. The windows were closed. No one else was home. The next day, Carl arrived with a container of soup. You poor thing, she cooed, stroking my arm without permission. You must feel awful, always thinking you're the problem. That kind of guilt must be heavy. My blood ran cold. I didn't react. I didn't speak. I didn't let my face move even a millimeter. Inside, something snapped. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't her intuition. This wasn't her guessing. She was listening. Not once, not accidentally, but constantly. The turning point came a week later. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing violently. A text from Daniel. We need to talk. Come to my mom's house. My stomach dropped. I got dressed quickly and drove over, heart pounding the entire way. When I walked into her living room, they were both standing there, Daniel with his arms crossed, and Carl smiling faintly as if she had been waiting. Sit, she said softly. Her politeness was always a warning. I sat. Daniel looked frustrated, tired, and slightly angry. Carl picked up her phone, tapped the screen, and then the worst moment of my life unfolded. A voice began playing. My voice, shaky, cracked, exhausted, saying things I had whispered only in private moments to Daniel. I feel like she hates me. She wants to control every part of our life. I don't trust her motives. I don't feel safe in this house anymore. Each sentence hit me like a punch. Daniel looked horrified. Not at her, at me. Ava, he said, voice low and disappointed, how could you say this stuff about my mother? My throat closed. I looked at him, then at her. And the way Carol stared at me, calm, superior, victorious, told me everything.
She didn't just want to listen to me. She wanted to destroy me with my own words. But in that moment, between humiliation and rage, a cold clarity washed over me. I whispered, "Where did you get that recording?" Carol blinked, smiled sweetly, and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you'd be surprised what a mother can hear when she truly cares." And that was when I realized this wasn't about caring. This was about control. And she was not going to stop. Not until she owned everything, including my marriage. I drove home in complete silence. Not a single thought formed clearly. Everything inside me was one long, buzzing, electric shock. My own voice played back to me like evidence. My own husband looking at me like I was the villain. And my mother-in-law smiling like she had finally won something she'd been fighting for before I even knew there was a war. By the time I parked in front of our house, my hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. I sat there for almost 10 minutes, breathing, trying not to cry, trying not to scream, trying not to go back in my car and drive away forever. When I finally walked inside, the house felt different, like it was alive and watching me. I stood in the middle of the living room and whispered to myself, "This house is not safe. Not emotionally, not mentally, not physically." Because someone had listened to me in it, repeated me, recorded me, used me, and I didn't know how deep it went. That night, Daniel came home late. When he entered the bedroom, he didn't sit beside me, didn't touch me, didn't ask if I was okay. He stood on his side of the room and spoke like someone addressing a stranger. "Ava, why didn't you tell me you were feeling all this?"
I looked at him, stunned. "I did tell you," I said softly. "Every time I told you your mother was crossing boundaries, you defended her." He rubbed his temples. "But you said things you never told me, things you kept from me. Why?" I stared at him, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. He didn't ask, "How did she record you? Why does she have secret audio files of my wife? What gives her the right to enter our home and spy?" No. His only concern was, "Why did you say those things about my mother?" I realized something painful in that moment, something that hollowed me out. Daniel didn't want the truth. He wanted comfort. He wanted simplicity. He wanted his mother to stay perfect in his eyes. And if that meant believing I was the ungrateful, dramatic wife, he would choose that every time. The next day, I took action. I'm a nurse. I am trained to stay calm under pressure, to observe, to connect symptoms to causes. So I treated the house like a patient. I woke up early, tied my hair back, put on gloves, and began inspecting every inch of our home, room by room, not emotionally, clinically. I checked air vents, electrical outlets, the baseboards under furniture, behind the TV, inside lamps in picture frames, inside the smoke detectors again, under the nightstand, behind the bed frame, even the sewing box in the closet. Nothing. Or at least, nothing obvious. By noon, I felt myself hitting a wall. "Why can't I find anything?" I whispered, frustrated. Then I realized something. Carol was old-fashioned, yes, but she wasn't technologically stupid. She was controlling, obsessive, territorial, but not reckless. If she had placed something in the house, she would have hidden it somewhere she had regular access to, somewhere she was always allowed to be, somewhere I never suspected. And then it clicked. So suddenly, I froze in the hallway. The kitchen. She lived in my kitchen. She rearranged things, cleaned things, opened drawers, moved spices around, touched cabinets without asking. She spent more time in my kitchen than in her own. And if there was anything in this house that she needed to maintain, replace batteries, adjust, check, she would hide it where she had the most freedom to snoop. My pulse kicked up as I walked into the kitchen. I scanned the room, my eyes jumping from object to object. The fruit bowl, the spice rack, the small Bluetooth speaker on the shelf, the decorative vase by the window, the cookie jar she had gifted us. The little ceramic bird, she said, brightened the room. I stared at it. That stupid ceramic bird. Carol had given it to us the second week after moving in. Put it somewhere visible, she'd said. It's symbolic, a reminder that someone is always watching over you. Always watching. A chill ran down my spine. I grabbed the ceramic bird. It felt heavier than it should. I turned it over. At first, I saw nothing. Then, catching the light just right, I noticed it. A hairline seam running across the bottom, as if the bottom could twist. My heart hammered. My fingers trembled as I rotated the base. It didn't twist smoothly. It clicked, like something locking into place. And the moment it opened, I stopped breathing. Inside the bird, tucked neatly behind a small grill, was a tiny circular device, a microphone. A functioning, high-sensitivity, long-range microphone. Not a baby monitor, not a camera, not a toy. A deliberate recording device. A spy tool. My vision blurred for a second. My knees almost gave out. I found it. I found the thing that had been stealing my privacy, my safety, my peace. And the worst part wasn't the microphone. It was the tiny green sticker on the battery pack. A sticker with handwriting I would recognize anywhere. Carol's neat cursive letters. Kitchen bird, replace quarterly. I covered my mouth with both hands to stop myself from screaming. She wasn't listening accidentally. She wasn't listening sometimes. She wasn't listening from afar. She was maintaining the device, like it was part of her routine, part of my home, part of her control. But one question rose above all the others. If this was just one device, how many more were there? Because now I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was a system. And I hadn't even uncovered the worst part yet. Daniel knew more than he was telling me. Finding the microphone inside that ceramic bird didn't just confirm my suspicions, it shattered something inside me that I didn't even realize had already been cracking. I stood in the center of the kitchen, holding the opened figurine like it was a piece of radioactive material, my fingertips trembling while my heartbeat thundered in my ears. It wasn't just the device itself that terrified me. It was the fact that it had been intentionally hidden inside an object she had given us, a Trojan horse, a gift with a purpose, something she placed here so she could have access not only to our home, but to the private parts of my mind. And the detail that made everything worse, the neat little sticker with her handwriting, proved that this wasn't a one-time violation. This was a routine, a system, a habit she had maintained like someone watering her favorite plant. I closed the figurine quickly and placed it back exactly where it had been, because I understood immediately that reacting emotionally, panicking, or confronting Daniel right away would be a mistake. If Carol was bold enough to plant recording devices in our home, she was bold enough to lie, manipulate, or even twist the entire situation around on me. I needed strategy, not emotion. And I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. One microphone meant there could be more. One hidden object meant a pattern. One discovery meant an entire plan I hadn't noticed because I had been too busy trying to be a good wife and not start conflicts. I walked through the house with a completely new awareness, as if every object had sprouted eyes and ears overnight. Suddenly, all her comments made sense. The strangely accurate things she would mention in casual conversation, the arguments she would reference, even though we had them behind closed doors. Her confidence in speaking to me like she knew my secrets. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overreacting. My instincts had been screaming the truth long before my mind caught up. Before doing anything else, I needed to test what Daniel knew. When he came home later that evening, I watched him closely. Not his words, but his face. The way his eyes shifted around the room. The way he avoided sitting near the kitchen counter. Something about his body language was off, as if he was suddenly uncomfortable in our home. I forced myself to act normal, asked him how work was, made small talk during dinner, and let him think I was trying to move on from the recording incident. But while I stirred pasta sauce on the stove, I noticed him glance, just for a second, toward the ceramic bird. It wasn't obvious, but it was familiar, the kind of glance people give to check whether something is still where they left it. At that exact moment, I felt the floor tilt under me. If he glanced intentionally, then he wasn't as innocent or clueless as he pretended to be. And if he wasn't innocent, then the situation was even more complicated than I thought. I took a quiet breath, steadying myself, and said nothing. That night, while he showered, I quietly picked up the ceramic bird again, not to open it this time, but to check something else. The bottom showed faint fingerprints, not just mine. The dust around it had been disturbed earlier than today. And one more detail I hadn't noticed before. The small felt pads on the bottom were slightly misaligned, as if someone had removed and reattached them more than once. My stomach tightened. Carol wasn't the only one who had touched this recently. Daniel had too. I placed the bird back exactly where it had been and repeated the same motion 6 or 7 times until I was completely sure there was no visible sign I had tampered with it. If Carol checked this device regularly, then she might inspect it soon. If she realized I had discovered it, things could escalate fast, faster than I was prepared for. But there was a second, darker possibility forming in my mind. If Daniel had known about the device, even partially, then the betrayal wasn't just coming from his mother, it was coming from inside my own marriage. Later that night, he climbed into bed and acted as if nothing had happened between us. He kissed my temple, wrapped an arm around me, and whispered, "I love you, you know that, right?" But instead of warming me, his words felt like they were echoing down a hallway. I felt distance where closeness should have been. His affection felt practiced, almost strategic, like something he was doing because someone advised him to, or because he wanted to maintain an illusion rather than share something real. I didn't sleep. Again. But this time, I wasn't just scared. I was angry. Not the wild, emotional kind of anger. A cold, calculating anger that comes when someone realizes they've been underestimated. The next morning, I woke up before him, got dressed quietly, and went straight to the hardware store. I bought a small electromagnetic frequency detector, a basic model, nothing too professional, but enough to pick up wireless audio transmitters or recording devices. When I returned home, I waited until Daniel left for work and then walked room to room, passing the scanner slowly across surfaces, shelves, vents, and decorative objects. When the detector suddenly spiked in the living room near the bookshelf, a chill went through me. That shelf held books we never touched, decorative items chosen more for appearance than usefulness, and, of course, 2 more objects Carol had brought into our home as a gesture of love. As the green light blinked rapidly and the small device vibrated in my palm, I closed my eyes for a brief second and whispered, "Okay, so this is who you really are." Because now there was no denying it. One microphone wasn't the problem. I was living inside a carefully constructed trap, and Carol wasn't just listening, she was collecting. The moment the detector spiked on the bookshelf, the atmosphere in the room shifted in a way I can't fully explain. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was subtle, like the walls themselves tightened around me. The small device vibrated in my palm, and although it was a faint tremor, it sent a clear message through my entire body. This wasn't an accident, and it definitely wasn't the only one. One microphone hidden inside a ceramic bird could still be dismissed as a single act of manipulation, but 2 devices placed in 2 different rooms meant intentional planning. It meant Carol had spent real time thinking about where to place these things, how to hide them, and how to check them without raising suspicion. And if she had done this twice, there was no reason to believe she had stopped there. I slowly scanned the row of objects on the shelf, allowing myself a brief pause before touching anything. There was a metal bookend shaped like a leaf, decorative, heavier than it looked, and something Carol had gifted us last Christmas. Beside it stood a framed photo of her and Daniel from years ago, a picture she insisted we display somewhere prominent. Next to that sat the vases and trinkets she occasionally rotated through our house, each one accompanied by comments like, "It brightens the space," or "This reminds me of Daniel's childhood." They were sentimental on the surface, harmless even, until you understood that sentiment was her favorite disguise. I moved the detector closer, and the signal intensified near a tall ceramic vase with blue hand-painted flowers. Of course it had been her gift. She had brought it over after a dentist appointment, claiming she saw it in a shop window and felt something special about it. Back then, I had laughed, not realizing that the special feeling she mentioned was likely the fact that the vase had a hollow base large enough to hide a recording transmitter. When the device in my hand blinked faster, my breath caught. I lifted the vase carefully, checking the underside, and there it was, a tiny removable panel, almost invisible unless you were actively looking for it. That moment hit me harder than the first discovery, because unlike the ceramic bird, which could be dismissed as decorative clutter, this was an object she had watched me interact with dozens of times. I had carried it to the sink to rinse dust off the rim. I had moved it to wipe the shelf beneath it. I had even filled it with water and flowers, completely unaware that every movement I made was being transmitted to someone who should have never had access to my private life. This wasn't passive listening. This was surveillance. This was obsession. I didn't open the panel right away. Instead, I looked at the vase, then at the shelf, then at the entire living room, trying to piece together the terrifying truth forming in front of me. These devices weren't just scattered randomly, they were placed in areas she had constant excuses to check, clean, or adjust. She visited often, sometimes unannounced, and always with the same warm smile that hid the fact that she had walked into my house to maintain her network of control. And the realization that she had an entire routine around these objects made something else click in my mind. Daniel knew the routine too. He wasn't shocked during the confrontation at her house. He wasn't confused about how she had those recordings. He wasn't curious about the source. His only concern was that I had said those things, not how she had obtained them. And now, remembering the quick glance he gave toward the ceramic bird the previous night, I felt a chilling suspicion settle into my bones. Maybe he didn't know everything, but he knew enough. Enough to avoid certain areas, enough to stay quiet, enough to let his mother keep control as long as it kept the peace for him. I carefully placed the vase back in its original position, lining it exactly as it had been. If Carol checked it frequently, she would notice even a slight shift. I realized then that I was no longer just discovering microphones, I was playing a game, one she thought she had already won. But now the rules had changed. I wasn't going to panic. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to collect evidence, piece by piece, the same way she had collected pieces of my life. Standing there in the living room, the detector still glowing faintly in my hand, I understood something important. This wasn't simply about her invading my privacy. It was about control, dominance, and the satisfaction she got from placing herself at the center of our marriage. As long as she knew more than I did, as long as she manipulated the flow of information, she believed she was untouchable. But she had underestimated me, and soon she would regret it. By the time I finished scanning the house, a quiet certainty settled over me, not panic, not fear, but a strange, focused calm, the kind of calm that arrives when you finally stop doubting your instincts and start preparing for the reality in front of you. I knew now that the devices weren't isolated accidents. I knew they were intentionally placed where she had constant access. And I knew I had been living inside a structure built by someone who wanted control more than anything else. What I didn't know yet was why she wanted that control so badly, or how far she was willing to go to protect it. I spent the afternoon sitting in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone while my mind worked faster than it had in months. The situation wasn't just about surveillance. It was about manipulation. Carol wasn't simply listening for curiosity, she was listening with intention. She didn't use the recordings randomly, she used them strategically. She waited for the perfect moment to reveal them, to embarrass me, to create conflict between Daniel and me, to insert herself as the victim who needed defending. It was psychological warfare disguised as concern, and I knew that if I handled this wrong, she could twist it again, maybe even worse than before. When Daniel arrived home that evening, his behavior immediately confirmed my suspicions. He walked inside slowly, scanning the room in a way I had never seen before, as if checking landmarks. His eyes briefly landed on the bookshelf, then the kitchen doorway, then the hallway leading to our bedroom. It was subtle, but I couldn't unsee it. The awareness in his eyes wasn't the awareness of someone afraid of an intruder. It was the awareness of someone who knows where things are hidden. He kissed my cheek as usual, but the gesture felt routine, hollow, like something he did out of habit rather than affection. I could almost feel the space between us widening, not physically, but emotionally, as if he was protecting something he didn't want me to uncover. "Dinner?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Sure," he replied, but his voice was distant, distracted. He sat at the table and scrolled through his phone, and every few seconds, his gaze flickered to the vase on the shelf. It wasn't blatant, but the glance was there. Repeated, measured. I watched him quietly, stirring pasta on the stove while thinking, he knows. Maybe not everything, but he knows something. Whether he knew the full extent of his mother's system or only pieces of it didn't matter. Knowing even a little meant he was complicit through silence. And silence, in situations like this, isn't neutral. Silence protects power. Silence serves the abuser, not the victim. Over dinner, I decided to test him. I was thinking, I began casually, taking a sip of water, about rearranging the living room, maybe moving the bookshelf somewhere else or taking down a few decorations. The place feels cluttered. He dropped his fork. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to slice through the air. "The bookshelf," he repeated too quickly. "Yes," I said, keeping my tone light. "Why? Do you like it where it is?" His eyes darted toward the shelf again before he could stop himself. I just think it looks fine. Why change things for no reason?" "It's not for no reason," I replied gently. "I just want the house to feel like mine again." The word mine made him stiffen. For a brief moment, he looked at me with something strained, worry, maybe, or panic hidden under irritation. Then he pushed his plate away and stood up. "I'm going to shower," he said abruptly. I watched him leave the room, and as soon as he was out of sight, I let my face drop. Not into sadness, into realization. His reaction wasn't the reaction of someone confused or indifferent. It was the reaction of someone afraid that I might move or disturb something important. The kind of reaction that meant he knew damn well why certain objects in this house had to stay exactly where they were. When the shower started running upstairs, I stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and opened the cabinet beneath it. Inside were old board games, Christmas decorations, and a stack of outdated folders Daniel had insisted on keeping just in case. I pulled out the folders and placed them on the carpet. They were filled with old bills, warranty papers, and random receipts. Nothing unusual. But what made me stop was the back of the cabinet itself. The wooden panel had a tiny, almost invisible separation line, too neat to be a manufacturing flaw. I pressed my fingers against the edge. It moved. My heart pounded once, heavy and deep. Slowly, carefully, I pulled the panel forward. It slid open silently, revealing a narrow, concealed compartment, just wide enough to hide a palm-sized device. Inside, resting neatly in the center, was a receiver, a small black box with a blinking blue light that indicated it was active. Not a microphone, not a transmitter, a receiver, meaning the signals from the other devices weren't going directly to Carol's house. They were being collected here, inside my home, inside my walls, inside a compartment I didn't even know existed. Daniel knew about this. He had to. There was no way he didn't. This wasn't something his mother could maintain without him noticing. And in that moment, the truth hit me so hard I had to steady myself with the edge of the cabinet. Carol wasn't working alone. She wasn't just spying. She was monitoring, organizing, and receiving everything. And Daniel, my husband, was letting her. For several long seconds, I just stared at the receiver in the hidden compartment, unable to move or even breathe properly. It wasn't only the existence of the device that shook me, it was the way it sat there, perfectly fitted into the space like it belonged, like it had been there for months, maybe years, quietly gathering every word spoken in the living room, in the kitchen, in the hallway, a silent witness to conversations I thought were private, a silent accomplice to a woman who had no right to hear any of them. And the blinking blue light, God, that light told me the device wasn't old, it wasn't forgotten, it wasn't abandoned. It was active, meaning someone was checking it, someone was maintaining it, someone was making sure it stayed alive. Someone inside this house. I reached out, my fingers hovering over the receiver, not ready to touch it yet. The plastic casing was smooth, deliberately unbranded, the kind someone buys online to avoid questions. A tiny antenna extended from the top, so small I hadn't noticed it at first glance. The device wasn't complicated, but it was designed for one purpose: to collect signals and hold them until someone extracted them. Carol didn't have the key to this cabinet. Daniel did. That realization broke something soft inside me, something I hadn't even realized I was still holding on to. I had told myself for months that Daniel was simply naive, overly loyal, blind to his mother's manipulation. I had convinced myself that he defended her because he didn't see what she was capable of. I had always given him the benefit of the doubt, believing that once he understood the truth, he would take my side. But this? Hiding a receiver inside our home, letting her record us, never questioning her access, her behavior, her knowledge. This was not ignorance. This was participation. I closed the cabinet quietly, making sure everything looked untouched. When I stood up, I caught my reflection in the glass of the framed photo on the shelf. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, her eyes sharp, her posture tense, her expression caught somewhere between betrayal and determination. But beneath all of that, beneath the anger and confusion, there was something else building up. Clarity. A plan forming in the shadows of my mind. If they wanted to watch me, then I wanted to see exactly what they were watching. When Daniel came downstairs after his shower, he acted normally, too normally. He moved through the room with practiced casualness, like an actor repeating a routine blocking on stage. He asked if I wanted tea. He asked about my day. He sat on the couch scrolling through his phone with one leg bouncing slightly, something he did when he was anxious, not relaxed. "Everything okay?" he asked, without looking up. "Fine," I replied. The word came out steady, controlled, even warm. He didn't notice anything off, because I wasn't going to let him. Not yet, not until I had everything I needed. We watched a show together, or at least pretended to. I couldn't focus on the screen. My attention was on him. The way he avoided glancing at the bookshelf now, the way he sighed when he thought I wasn't listening, the way he leaned into the couch cushions like he hoped its softness could swallow his guilt whole. When the episode ended, he stretched his arms casually. "You going to bed?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm tired." It wasn't a lie. I was exhausted, but not in the way he thought. My body wasn't tired. My mind was. I walked upstairs and closed the bedroom door behind me, but instead of changing into pajamas, I stood in the dark, letting the quiet wrap around me. Then a thought dawned on me. Sharp, clean, decisive. If Carol was listening, then she would hear everything. So, I would give her something to hear. Not the truth, not my fear, not my plan. A performance. I picked up my phone, turned on the recorder, not for her, but for evidence, and spoke with just enough volume to carry through the walls, mimicking a conversation with my sister. I just need a few days, a break, a little time away from the house to breathe. I paced slowly across the room. No, I won't tell Daniel yet. He's been stressed. I'll leave him a note. I'll be back before he gets home from work on Friday. I paused dramatically. Yeah, I'll stay at that hotel near the clinic. The one with the card entry elevators, the one nobody can access without a reservation. And then I lowered my voice to a whisper, not for the recorder, but for her. I just need privacy. Real privacy. I ended the fake call, saved the audio file, and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart beat steadily, not with panic, but with purpose. If she was listening, if Daniel was involved, if they thought I was predictable, emotional, fragile, they were about to find out exactly how wrong they were. Because I wasn't running away. I was setting a trap. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt the ground shift in my favor. I woke up the next morning before Daniel, lying completely still while I listened to the familiar rhythm of his breathing beside me. My plan from the night before replayed in my mind, not with doubt, but with an almost unsettling clarity. If Carol had heard my staged phone call, and I was certain she had, then the clock had already started ticking. She wouldn't wait. She wouldn't ignore it. She would act quickly, because the thought of me having privacy would disturb her more than anything. Daniel shifted beside me, half awake, and I closed my eyes to steady my breathing. He murmured something and rolled onto his side, unaware that the woman lying inches from him was no longer confused, no longer gaslit, no longer blind. I wasn't the version of myself he had been exploiting. I wasn't the woman he could soothe back into silence with a kiss on the forehead and a tired apology. I was alert now, watching, collecting. When he finally got up and headed into the shower, I moved with purpose. I packed a small bag, just enough to make my plan believable, but not enough to actually leave for long. A pair of jeans, a sweater, my toothbrush, a hairbrush, a phone charger. I placed them inside the duffel bag quietly, making sure the zippers made just enough sound for anyone listening to interpret it as preparation, not performance. Then I went downstairs and wrote a short note on the kitchen counter. Daniel, I need a couple of days to clear my head. Don't worry, I'll be back Friday. Ava. A simple note. Not emotional, not accusatory, just enough to mirror the story I had already fed into the walls of this house. I placed the note exactly where I knew he'd find it, beside the coffee maker. He never started his day without it. Before leaving, I checked the bookshelf one more time. I didn't touch the receiver, didn't disturb anything. I only needed to confirm that the blue light was still blinking. And it was. Whatever this device recorded next would go straight to Carol, maybe even Daniel, and they would think they had just gotten ahead of me again. But they hadn't. I walked out the front door at 8:12 a.m., pulling the duffel bag over my shoulder with just enough tension to make it look heavy. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove 2 blocks away before turning into a small side street. Then I parked, turned off the engine, and waited. At 8:23 a.m., Daniel called. I didn't answer. At 8:27 a.m., he texted, "Where are you? Can we talk before you leave?" I ignored that too. At 8:32 a.m., the predictable thing happened, the thing I was counting on. He called his mother. Not once, 3 times in a row. The call logs on my dashboard lit up through the Bluetooth connection, screen flashing his name and then hers, hers and then his. He wasn't trying to call me again. He wasn't trying to stop me from leaving. He was trying to coordinate. And that told me everything I needed to know. At 8:40 a.m., I saw her car turn into our street. Carol, driving faster than usual. Her white sedan pulled up in front of my house, and she stepped out with the urgency of someone trying to prevent a crime, except the crime she feared was simply me being alone, unmonitored, unreachable.
She didn't even knock. She used her key. She went inside, exactly as I expected. I watched from a distance, my heart steady, almost cold, as the front door closed behind her. A few minutes later, she reappeared with something small clutched in her hand. Even from far away, I knew what it was. A device. Maybe the vase microphone? Maybe the bird? Maybe something I hadn't found yet. She scanned the perimeter of my house, glancing around as if expecting to see me hiding behind a tree. Then she got back into her car and drove off, heading toward the main road, straight toward her house. She wasn't just maintaining the devices. She was collecting them, erasing evidence, panicking. Perfect. I waited exactly 10 minutes before starting my engine and heading the opposite direction. Not toward a hotel, not toward the clinic, toward a friend's spare apartment, a place Carol didn't know existed, a place Daniel hadn't even visited, a place with no microphones, no receivers, no hidden compartments. When I walked inside, I finally allowed myself to exhale. I wasn't hiding, I wasn't running, I was preparing. Because now I had what I needed, proof she was listening, proof she was maintaining devices, proof Daniel had lied, proof they were both involved in monitoring me. But the next step would require precision. I sat on the edge of the borrowed bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened a blank document. I began writing everything down. Dates, conversations, her comments, the devices I found, the way Daniel reacted, every evidence point. A timeline, a story, a pattern, not for revenge, for protection. Because the truth was bigger than Carol listening. The truth was bigger than Daniel helping her. The truth was this: they had committed a crime, and I wasn't going to be the one who stayed silent about it. I didn't leave the apartment for the rest of the day, not because I was afraid, but because I finally had the space to think without being watched, interrupted, or manipulated. For the first time in months, I could hear my own thoughts clearly. No microphones, no receivers, no hidden listening posts disguised as decor. Just silence, real silence. I spread everything out in front of me on the table. My notes, timestamps, voice memos, screenshots of Daniel's repeated calls to his mother, and a list of every object Carol had ever brought into our home. When I looked at it all together, the pattern was horrifyingly clear. She hadn't just monitored us for curiosity or pettiness. She had created a systematic method of surveillance designed to keep control over her son, and by extension, over me. It took hours before I realized I had written nearly 10 pages of documented behavior, dates, incidents, recordings, suspicious movements, and her direct quotes. Some details seemed minor at first, but when lined up chronologically, they painted a picture of calculated control. And Daniel, his involvement was no longer a question. Silence may not leave fingerprints, but it leaves patterns. His silence was a pattern. Around 6 p.m., I finally opened my laptop and searched for what I knew I needed next: legal counsel. I wasn't filing anything yet. I wasn't ready to explode the situation immediately, but I needed information, real information, from someone who understood the severity of unauthorized surveillance inside a private residence. And what I found changed everything. In my state, secretly recording someone inside their home, especially through planted devices, was a felony, not a misunderstanding, not a boundary issue, a crime, punishable by prison time, fines, and a permanent criminal record. The law didn't care if the person was family. The law didn't care if the person claimed they were helping. The law didn't care about intentions. The law cared about consent. And I hadn't consented to anything. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the validation, from knowing that everything Carol had done, everything she thought she could get away with, had real consequences. And Daniel, by failing to stop it, was legally implicated too. The receiver hidden in our wall wasn't just a moral betrayal, it was physical evidence. My next move needed to be careful. Just as I finished reading the legal section for the third time, my phone buzzed violently on the table. When I saw the screen, my chest tightened. Daniel. He had called earlier, yes, but this call was different. 17 missed calls, 9 unread messages, 3 voicemails. He was spiraling. I listened to none of them. Not yet. A few minutes passed and the phone started ringing again. I almost ignored it, until I saw the name on the screen. Carol. My pulse quickened. She had never called me directly before unless she wanted to manipulate a situation or pretend to clean up something her son did. The fact that she was calling meant she wasn't confident in whatever Daniel was telling her, or worse, she had realized exactly what I had discovered. I let it ring until the last second, then answered. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice small, hesitant, exactly what she expected. There was a pause on the other end, one beat too long, and then her voice came through, breathy and forced, like she was trying to play the role of concerned mother. "Ava, sweetheart, Daniel told me you left the house. Is everything okay? I'm very worried." Her worry was fabricated. I could hear it in the way her syllables bent too softly, too sweetly. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about control. She was worried about the silence, because silence meant I wasn't where she could hear me. "I just needed space," I said quietly. "Oh dear, you know you can always talk to us," she replied, emphasizing the word us in a way that confirmed she saw herself as part of my marriage. Running away won't fix anything. I smiled bitterly at the apartment wall. "I'm not running," I said. She hesitated. "Well, Daniel is very upset. He feels abandoned." Not surprised, not exposed, not ashamed. Abandoned. "I left him a note," I replied. "Yes, but notes don't tell us where you are," she said a little too sharply. She caught herself and softened her tone again. "Sweetheart, where are you staying?" There it was. The real question, the real motive, the real panic. She needed to know my location. She needed to know whether she had access to me. She needed to know whether her devices were still working. "I'm safe," I said simply. Silence. Longer this time. She finally exhaled, a shaky, forced breath. "Well, please let us know when you'll be back," she said. "We just want to help you." I almost laughed. Help me? Her help had destroyed the sense of safety in my own home. When she hung up, I didn't feel shaken. I felt empowered. Because now I had recorded her tone, her pressure, her word choices, and her inability to hide the urgency in her voice. I pressed play on her voicemail messages immediately. They were even better than I expected. In one, her voice cracked as she whispered, "Ava, please call us back. We need to know you're okay." We need to know where you are. That's what she meant. I saved every voicemail, every text, every missed call log. Everything became part of the file I was building. When the sun finally set and the apartment darkened around me, the reality of the situation crystallized in a way that made my breath catch once more. Carol wasn't just afraid of me leaving. She was terrified of losing control. And Daniel wasn't just caught in the middle. He had chosen his side. The two of them together believed they had the upper hand, but they had no idea what was coming, because I had one final move left, the move that would determine everything, and it required me to walk back into that house one last time. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, but because everything inside me had aligned. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't reacting to what Carol and Daniel did. I was planning what I was going to do next. The apartment was dark except for the soft glow of my laptop screen. On it sat a folder, neatly labeled, time-stamped, organized, containing every voice memo, every screenshot, every description of the devices I had found, and a full account of the illegal surveillance conducted inside my home. A case file. a weapon, a truth they never expected me to assemble. By dawn, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I wasn't going to negotiate. I wasn't going to beg my husband to listen or understand or suddenly grow a spine. No, I was going to walk straight into the house they thought belonged to them and take back everything they believed they controlled. But first, I needed one more piece of evidence, one final verification. Something that tied Daniel directly to the system, not just by implication, not just by behavior, but by undeniable action. I waited until the morning rush passed, until I knew Daniel would have already left for work, and Carol would still be asleep or pretending to be. Then I grabbed my duffel bag, locked up the apartment, and headed back toward my house. When I pulled into my driveway, the street was quiet. The early sun cast long, harmless shadows across the lawn, making the house look almost peaceful, almost safe. It was neither. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, inhaling the familiar scent of coffee that lingered from Daniel's machine. Everything looked untouched, everything looked normal, but I knew better. I went straight to the bookshelf. The hidden compartment was still closed. That meant Carol hadn't been here since yesterday, and Daniel hadn't checked anything that morning either. Good. I needed it exactly as it was. I pulled the panel open, and there it was. The receiver, the blinking blue light, the heart of their whole operation. I stared at it for a moment, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out something I had bought on the way, a small body camera, already recording. I held it steady as I filmed the device, narrated the date and time, and showed the hidden compartment fully open. This was the final proof, the smoking gun. I was about to close the panel when I heard a sound behind me. A soft, distinct click. The front door unlocking. Footsteps. Then Daniel's voice drifted through the hallway. "Ava?" My pulse kicked instantly, but not from fear, from readiness. Of course he came home early. Of course he panicked when I didn't respond to his messages. Of course he wanted to check the house before reporting anything to his mother. He stepped into the living room, confusion covering his face when he saw me. "Ava, what are you doing here? Why didn't you call me?" I didn't answer right away. I closed the cabinet gently, stood up, and faced him with the calmest expression I could manage. "I needed something," I replied. He blinked, trying to read me. Then his gaze flicked, just for a second, toward the shelf. That tiny movement confirmed everything. He knew. Maybe not the technical details, maybe not every device, maybe not how much his mother had collected, but he knew enough to be terrified of what I had found. His tone shifted, tighter now. "Ava, what did you touch?" There it was. No concern about my well-being, no apology, no attempt to talk through our issues, just panic about the system he allowed into our home. I stepped forward slowly, deliberately, watching the fear creep into his eyes. "What did I touch?" I repeated. "Daniel, that's the wrong question." He swallowed. Then what?" "The right question," I said, lowering my voice so it struck him like a cold blade, "is what you touched, what you knew about, what you let your mother install in the house we shared." His face drained. "Ava, it's not what you think." "Really?" I cut him off. "Then tell me. Tell me how a receiver got inside our wall. Tell me why you flinched last night when I mentioned rearranging the living room. Tell me why your mother shows up with decorations that are actually microphones." He opened his mouth. No words came out. Of course they didn't, because the truth wasn't defensible. I continued. "You want to know where I've been? I'll tell you. I've been somewhere quiet, somewhere private, somewhere your mother couldn't listen and you couldn't hide." He took a step toward me. "Ava, stop, please, let me explain." I stepped back. "There is nothing you can say that justifies illegal surveillance inside your own home." He froze. I had said the word. Illegal. He knew what it meant. He knew this wasn't family drama anymore. This was a crime. And now he finally looked scared for the right reason. But I wasn't done. "I documented everything," I said softly. "Every device, every pattern, every recording. Every time your mother repeated something I only said inside these walls. And I filmed the receiver this morning. His chest rose sharply. Ava, you're not going to the police. I tilted my head. Why wouldn't I?
He looked like a man drowning. Ava, please, we can fix this. I'll talk to her. I'll make her stop. We don't need to involve. I interrupted him one last time. I'm done letting you or your mother decide what I need. The room fell silent. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know who I had become. Someone who wasn't afraid anymore. After several seconds, he whispered, almost broken, "What are you going to do?" I looked right at him. Exactly what she never expected. And with that, I picked up my bag, walked past him, and left the house he and his mother once controlled. Not running away, not hiding, walking straight into the next phase of my plan. Leaving the house that morning felt completely different from the day before. Yesterday, I walked away because I needed safety. Today, I walked away because I finally understood my power. I wasn't escaping anything. I was stepping into control. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, I wasn't reacting to what Carol and Daniel were doing. I was deciding what I would do next. When I got into my car, my hands didn't shake, my breathing was steady. The clarity I felt wasn't warm or comforting. It was sharp, focused, almost frightening in its calmness. People think rage is loud, explosive, messy. But real rage, the kind that comes from betrayal, is cold, controlled, strategic. I drove straight to the law office I had researched the previous night, a small, unassuming place with wide windows and no unnecessary decor. The kind of office where things got done. The kind of place where truth mattered more than manipulation. The attorney called me in shortly after I arrived. When I sat down across from her, I didn't speak for a moment. I needed to take one breath before I began, because once the story started, it wasn't going to stop. Finally, I said the words that set everything into motion. Someone placed recording devices in my home, and I have proof. Her pen paused mid-air. She looked up slowly. Who placed them? My mother-in-law, and my husband knew. Her expression changed, serious, focused, concerned. I took out my folder, my phone, the body cam footage. I laid everything out on the table. The timestamps, the video of the receiver hidden inside the wall, the ceramic bird in the vase, the pattern of Carol's comments, the suspicious behaviors, the calls, her panic, Daniel's reactions. I showed her the list of dates, the documented instances, and even the recording of Carol's voice when she thought I was leaving. I told her everything. When I finished, the attorney sat back, exhaled, and said firmly, "Ava, this is extremely serious. You understand that, right?" "Yes," I said, "I do. This isn't just inappropriate. This is a felony. Anyone involved in placing or maintaining those devices can face criminal charges. Anyone involved." Those words hit with full force. Not just Carol. Daniel, too. "You have options," she continued. "You can file a criminal complaint, or you can also request an emergency protective order to keep both of them away from you while the investigation proceeds." I didn't hesitate. "Can I do both?" Her eyes softened with approval. "Absolutely. And in your situation, I recommend it." I felt something rise inside me. Not fear, not anxiety, but strength. Real strength. The kind that comes from choosing yourself after being pushed into a corner for too long. I signed the forms. I submitted the evidence. I gave a full statement. The attorney gathered the papers into a neat stack. They will both be legally notified within 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. 2 days until the facade Daniel and Carol had built collapsed under the weight of their own choices. When I stepped outside and got into my car, I didn't start the engine right away. I sat in the quiet, absorbing the reality. There was no going back after this. Not to the marriage, not to the house, not to the old version of myself who tried so hard to keep the peace. My phone rang suddenly, a private number. I answered before I could talk myself out of it. "Ava?" Her voice. "Carol." This time, her tone wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was trembling, rushed, almost breathless, like she could feel control slipping from her fingers. "I'm not sure what you think you found," she said quickly, "but whatever you're planning, you're making a mistake." A mistake.
the same word manipulators use when they start losing power. I kept my voice steady. No, Carol, the only mistake I made was not seeing who you were sooner. She inhaled sharply. Daniel is devastated. We're both worried. We want to help you. Please come home so we can talk. I'm not coming home. A long silence followed, heavy, dense. Then she whispered, "What did you do?" I didn't smile, but the satisfaction in my voice was undeniable. "Something you never expected," I said. I told the truth. And I hung up. For the first time in months, there was no fear in me at all, because the battle had begun, and I was no longer the one being hunted. The next 48 hours unfolded with an eerie mixture of silence and tension, like the forced calm in the air right before a storm tears everything apart. I stayed at the apartment, keeping my phone close, but refusing to answer any messages from Daniel. Every buzz of the device reminded me that something on their end was unraveling, piece by piece, without me needing to lift a finger. Late that afternoon, I received the official confirmation from my attorney. The protective order and criminal complaint had been filed. Law enforcement had what they needed. The notifications to Daniel and Carol were scheduled. This wasn't theoretical anymore. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't just a painful situation between family. It was legal now, a documented crime. And once the law steps in, manipulation stops working. Around 5 p.m., as the sun cast orange light into the apartment, my phone vibrated with a single text. No paragraphs this time, no apologies, no dramatic pleas. They served us. Us. Plural. Him and his mother. I stared at the message for a long moment, realizing the gravity of that word. He wasn't separating himself from her, not emotionally, not practically. Even when facing legal consequences, he still saw the two of them as a unit, a single side. And I wasn't on that side. Not anymore. I didn't reply. A full hour passed before my phone rang violently. Daniel again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, another call came in. Carol, then Daniel again. They alternated like a twisted rhythm, their desperation bleeding through the screen. I turned the phone face down, letting their panic echo into the air unanswered. When the knocks finally came, heavy and urgent, I knew immediately who it was. Not because they had tracked me somehow, but because desperate people do predictable things. I approached the door slowly, quietly, making sure the chain lock was secured before I opened it just an inch. Daniel stood there, shoulders tense, hair disheveled, eyes frantic in a way I had never seen before. Behind him, Carol hovered like a shadow that refused to detach, her expression a mix of outrage and fear disguised beneath a trembling smile. "Ava," Daniel started, reaching for the door instinctively. I closed it another inch, forcing him to stop. "No," I said calmly, "you're not coming inside." His breath hitched. "Ava, please, we need to talk, not like this." Carol stepped forward. "Sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. You didn't have to do something so extreme. If we all just sit down." I let out a laugh, a short, sharp one that surprised even me. "A misunderstanding? Is that what you call planting recording devices in my home?" Carol's face twitched, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you think you saw." "Stop." My voice cut through her excuse so cleanly that Daniel flinched. "I know exactly what I saw. I documented every piece of it, and now law enforcement knows too. This conversation won't change that." Carol's eyes widened with something close to real fear. "You went to the police?" "Yes," I said, "and a lawyer, and I filed a protective order." Daniel's voice cracked. "Ava, how could you do this?" How could I? The quiet anger in my tone made him step back. How could you let her spy on me? How could you ignore the signs? How could you choose her over our marriage? Carol reached out as if trying to calm things down. "Sweetheart, let's not make—" I cut her off again, firmer now. "You don't get to call me sweetheart. Not ever again." Her mouth snapped shut. Daniel's voice softened, desperate now. We can fix this. Please, don't involve the police any further. I'll talk to her. I'll make her stop. I'll get rid of everything. I stared at him, stunned by the sheer blindness of that statement. So you're not denying it, I said quietly. You're just hoping I'll protect you from the consequences. He closed his eyes briefly, like the truth stung him. I continued. Daniel, I gave you every chance. I tried to talk to you. I tried to set boundaries. I tried to believe you would protect our home, our marriage. But protecting your mother meant more to you than protecting me. Carol finally broke. You ungrateful girl. I shut the door in her face. The knock that followed was loud, furious, hollow, but I didn't flinch. On the other side of the wood, Daniel spoke again, voice cracking. Ava, please, open the door. We're your family. No, I said, loud enough for him to hear. You and your mother stopped being my family the moment you recorded me. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Final. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps retreating. The hallway fell quiet. For the first time in months, the quiet wasn't frightening. It was mine. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and exhaled slowly. They were losing control. Their system was collapsing, and they knew it. What they didn't know was that I wasn't even done yet. That night, after Carol and Daniel finally left the hallway, I locked the door, walked back into the quiet apartment, and let myself breathe for the first time in what felt like years. Not a shaky breath, not a panicked one. A steady, full inhale that reached all the way down into my chest, the kind of breath someone takes when they know, bone deep, that they're finally free. But freedom isn't a feeling. Freedom is a choice. And I still had one more choice left to make. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity that felt almost unreal. The sunlight spilled across the room in long stripes, illuminating everything in a warm gold, like the world was giving me permission to start over. I took a moment to sit up slowly, grounding myself in the silence. No hidden microphones, no manipulated conversations, no footsteps creeping through my house without warning. Just me. And that was enough. I got dressed, grabbed the folder with the evidence, and headed straight to the police station. My attorney had already prepared everything, but today I was giving my formal statement in person. The officers were respectful, focused, and serious. When they reviewed the photos of the receiver, the body cam video, the timestamps, the audio recordings, and the log of Carol's pattern of behavior, their expressions hardened. One of them finally said, Miss Avery, this is not a domestic dispute. This is a criminal operation. You were absolutely right to file. Hearing that out loud, criminal operation, sent a chill through me. Not fear, validation. The officer continued, Your husband and mother-in-law will both be questioned. The devices will be seized. A full investigation will begin immediately. I thanked them, signed the remaining papers, and walked out into the daylight with my head held higher than it had been in months. This chapter wasn't ending quietly. It was ending with accountability. When I arrived back at the apartment, I found a small envelope slipped under the door. There was no name on it, but the handwriting told me exactly who it was from. Daniel. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. Inside was a short letter, no long explanations, no denials, just a few shaky lines written in a hand I barely recognized. Ava, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop her. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to choose you. But I did love you. I'm sorry that wasn't enough. For a moment, I just stared at the words. If he had written something like this months ago, before the recordings, before the lies, before the betrayal, I might have believed him. I might have tried to fix things. I might have convinced myself that love was enough. But now, I understood something I didn't back then. Love is not loyalty without boundaries. Love is not silence in the face of wrongdoing. Love is not protecting the person who hurts you over the person you promised to protect. And love without respect? That's not love at all. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I dropped it into the trash. No anger, no sadness, just acceptance. That afternoon, my attorney called to confirm the next steps. Carol and Daniel had officially been served. The investigation was active. The protective order was in effect. They were not allowed to contact me anymore. Not by phone, not in person, not through anyone else. And for the first time, their silence felt right. I spent the rest of the day packing the last few items I'd left at the house: clothes, personal things, the plants I refused to abandon. Every item that went into the box felt like reclaiming a piece of myself Carol had tried to erase. When I locked the door of my old home for the final time, I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because the person I had become didn't live there anymore. Weeks passed. The investigation continued. Carol faced charges. Daniel faced consequences he never imagined. And me? I began rebuilding. I rented a small condo near the water, started therapy, picked up extra shifts at the clinic, and slowly filled my life with things that felt like mine again. Quiet mornings, warm coffee, sunlight on my skin, silence that wasn't monitored, peace that didn't need permission. One evening, as I sat on my new couch watching the waves outside the window, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I ignored it at first, assuming it was spam, until a voicemail notification popped up. When I pressed play, a familiar voice surfaced. Calmer, softer, more human than I had ever heard her. Carol. Ava, I suppose this doesn't mean anything now, but I just wanted to say, I lost myself, and I lost my son, and I don't know how to put anything back together. I'm sorry. For everything. The message ended. I didn't save it. I didn't delete it either. I just let it exist. Because forgiveness wasn't necessary, but closure mattered. I stood up, walked to the balcony, and let the breeze run through my hair. For the first time, I truly felt the freedom I had fought for. A life without surveillance, a home without manipulation, a future without fear. A future where I decided who I would become. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with warm gold and quiet promise, I realized something profound. I wasn't the woman they tried to break. I was the woman they failed to destroy. And that was the real ending to this story.